Hey, 8th grade. It is Monday, April 6th, and today we're going to talk about the Atonement. Last week we watched the crucifixion and talked about how Jesus died and the things that he said when he was on the cross and all of that. Right after that happens, Jesus is buried in the tomb. The tomb is guarded and protected with a stone. And then there's a period of waiting while he is dead in the tomb. So we're in the middle of this waiting. We're going to talk about what Jesus' death means and the atonement and what that is. And so for today's video and assignment, there is a worksheet that will help you to take notes, and then also it is the assignment that you are going to turn in. So what you'll need for this lesson is that assignment. So find that. Let me show you what it looks like. So it's called Atonement, and that's what it looks like. So you need to find that and have that ready. So either print it out or split screen it with the video so that you can take notes, and that you will be able to do this as you go through the video, because it will be the easiest way. So today we're talking about atonement, and I want to give you the definition for atonement before we start. So atonement is the act of making amends for something done wrong, and it refers to Jesus' sacrificial work for sinners. So making amends for something that you've done wrong. So when you do something at home, maybe you get in a fight with one of your siblings and you've hurt them, and then your parents tell you that you need to make up with them. So you might have to go say you're sorry, or you might have to do something to make up for what you've done, right? That's atonement. And so we're thinking in terms of people having sin and all of this stuff that we have between us and God, and that needs to be atoned for, that needs to be taken care of. And when we think about Jesus' death on the cross, the big question is always, well, why did Jesus die on the cross? And the easy Sunday school answer is to save us from our sins. But the question is, how does that really work? What does it mean? How does this one man's death have anything to do with my sin and my relationship with God? So what we're going to look at today is 3 different explanations of what that means and how that actually works, so that we can understand at maybe a little deeper level the way that this works. So we're going to walk through each one and talk about it, and as I go through, you need to take notes on your paper, and then at the end I'm going to ask your opinion about which one you like the best from the 3. So be thinking about that as you're watching, and that will be what you're going to do. So I'm going to switch over now to the first one. All right, so I apologize for the complications of doing this video this way, but I am at home and don't have the smartboard with me, so this is what you get. So let's start with the first explanation of the atonement. This one is called ransom, and so if you're not sure about that word, ransom, think about when somebody gets kidnapped, right? And the kidnappers ask for a ransom to get the person back. So you have to pay them a certain amount of money in order to get that person back that they've kidnapped. So think about ransom in those terms. So in the context of atonement, this is how this explanation works. So originally, God and people were happy and close to each other, but then this thing called sin came along, and that separate people from God. So you have the person, and then you have God. Over here, this is God. And they're really separate because of sin at this point. And also because of sin, they have now become slaves to Satan, because Satan is the ruler of darkness and evil and all of that. And so he takes people as his slaves. So there's Satan. And he has captured people. So now we are slaves to Satan. In slavery and bondage to Satan, as a result of the sin that we have done. So we are not able to get out of that situation on our own. We've been kidnapped, basically, by Satan. So what needs to happen is that somebody needs to offer the ransom for us. The penalty for sin, as it says in the Bible, is death. And so Satan is asking for that penalty to be paid, that ransom to be paid. And so then we have Jesus who comes along. So there's Jesus. We're going to make Jesus green, just like God. And he offers to pay the penalty, to pay the sacrifice. And so he dies on the cross. As the ransom for our sin, to pay that penalty to Satan. And then as a result of that, humans can be freed from their slavery to Satan and come back to being in close relationship with God. So basically the main point of this is that Jesus is paying the penalty, the ransom, to Satan, who has put us in slavery because of our sin. And when he did that, then we got set free from our slavery, and now we can be back with God again. So the key point of this is that Jesus rescued us from Satan and paid the ransom for that. And also, a verse that you can look up for this is Mark 10:45, which says that Jesus is the ransom for our sin. So that is the ransom explanation of how atonement works. Okay, so the second explanation of the atonement, now we're looking at satisfaction, to satisfy something. And this one is not going to include Satan in the picture at all. It's mainly about the relationship between people and God. So originally God creates humans and everything is great and wonderful. And God's like our Father, right? So he is proud of us and his creation and everything. But then, what happens? People sin. And as a result of that, God is dishonored. So this one focuses a lot on the honor of God, how as his children we should be following his commands and living in a way that pleases him, but we choose to disobey and go the other way. So we cause him dishonor by doing that. And as a result of that, we then owe him a debt that we cannot repay. So let's put an IOU here. We have this IOU to God. We have dishonored him. We owe him a debt to repay that honor. But the problem is that this debt is so big that it is beyond our ability to pay. In fact, this is an infinite IOU. So there's the infinity symbol to represent that we will never be able to pay this back on our own. So what happens is that God realizes that we can't, and so he offers us a solution, and that solution is Jesus. Because Jesus is God, but he's also human. And so because he's in between here, in the middle, he has the ability as God to demonstrate the honor and the perfect way of life, but as a human, he can stand for us and use himself as a way to pay back. So he is going to take this IOU and he is going to pay it for us. And the way that he pays that is through his death on the cross. So he dies on the cross. And because he is perfect and sinless, he can then pay this debt back to God. And then that, as a result, helps us to be able to come to God through him. Sorry, I should have drawn that arrow through God, but you get the picture, through Jesus. We are able to get back to him because the IOU has been paid and all of the honor has been restored through Jesus back to God. So, Jesus paid the debt we owed God. And a verse that talks about this is Hebrews 10:10, which basically says that we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Christ. So he is offering himself in our place to pay back what we owe to God. So that is the satisfaction explanation. Jesus satisfies everything that we need to give to God. All right, and our third explanation of atonement is the moral example. And this one is quite different from the other two and focuses more on what Jesus teaches us than it does on how he brings us back to God. So this one is focused on love and how we learn to love. Because in John, let me put the verse down here to begin with. In John 15:12-13, it says that his commandment for us is that we love one another as he has loved us. And so what God desires for us is that we show love for one another. But the problem is that human beings, because of sin, do not naturally love one another. We have this problem with loving, right? We are mean to each other, we insult each other, we get in fights and conflicts all the time. So even though God has commanded this, and he has said, I want you to love one another, and he's, giving us that love, we are still not doing it very well. So in order to show us how to love and teach us how to love, Jesus came to earth, right? So he sent Jesus down here to show us love. And he showed us that when he was on earth the whole time. But what it says in this verse in John 15 is that greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. And so the greatest example of God's love is Jesus offering himself as a sacrifice. So his ultimate demonstration of that love is dying on the cross. And when we look at that love, so we see this example and we're like, oh wow, he died for me, then what that does is that changes us. By watching his example, then we learn what it means to love. And we become able to love one another. So Jesus coming and dying and laying down his life for us is the ultimate example of love that God is giving us. And by watching that and learning from that, then we become able to love one another. So the key point here is that Jesus' death is the ultimate example of love and teaches us how to love each other. And that is the moral example explanation of the atonement. Okay, so now we've looked at 3 theories. I apologize, I realized after I did the videos that I didn't change the numbers, but you guys are smart and should be able to figure out which number is which from the names. So here they are: number 1, ransom; number 2, satisfaction; number 3, moral example. And as you finish your assignment, the last question just asks for your opinion. So there is no right or wrong answer for that, but you need to make sure you give me a reason why you think one of them makes more sense, and don't just say just because, but give me a thoughtful reason for why you like that particular one. And then once you finish your notes page, then you can submit that, and that's the assignment for today. So have a great day, and remember to thank God for what he did for us, for sending Jesus to die on the cross for us.